Hi, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the San Diego Politics Show. I'm your host, Matt Strabone, and I'm so glad you're joining us. We've got a great episode for you, and we'll get right to it. But first, you might be wondering what the show is. Well, it's like this. San Diego is America's 8th largest city, and San Diego County is America's 5th largest county. We're kind of a big deal. But it can feel like it's hard to get a handle on the people we elect to run this place, why they do what they do, and what it means for the rest of us. We're going to try to answer that for you every episode right here on the show. So first up today, my colleague Andrew Keatts, who also happens to be the editor of the Times of San Diego, as well as the 2025 Fantasy Football runner-up, will sit down for an in-depth interview with high-profile San Diego City Councilmember Sean Elo-Rivera. Then we'll have a good discussion about the Balboa Park parking fee controversy. And finally, to wrap things up, Andrew and I will share the first edition of our monthly local political power rankings. Stay tuned.
I'm Andrew Keatts, the General Manager and Editor at Times of San Diego, and I'm joined by the District 9 Councilmember, Sean Elo-Rivera. Sean, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Andy.
So, as we sit here today, you have just had a proposal at the City Council's Rules Committee. This was a ballot measure you've been working on for a few months now to bring a proposal to voters that would have imposed a tax on short-term vacation rentals. And that proposal basically died before it really got off the ground, by being shot down in the Rules Committee. Tell me what, theoretically, it seems to me that this would be in the realm of revenue possibilities, one that might not get as much pushback as others. It is at least plausibly something that's going to be paid by other people, not San Diegans. Why then do you think this sort of had such a short shelf life?
Yeah, one, I want to say I'm really proud of my team and the very big coalition that supported it getting to where it did. It made it through the first conversation at Rules Committee, came up a vote short yesterday. You're absolutely right that it is a way of potentially generating revenue that doesn't land on the backs of everyday people. It was much more than that, though. It was really more about housing. It was more about ensuring that people who live here have an opportunity to continue to live here. Mm-hmm. Students who are graduating here and want to be able to live here, that they can see a future for themselves. And trying to put these 11,000 homes that are sitting either empty or being used as mini hotels back on the market. My colleagues had a variety of reasons why they didn't support it. But we're also not done trying to figure out ways to address the housing shortage and make sure that the city is properly funded.
So about a year ago this time, you rolled out a proposal that was to introduce a minimum wage increase for tourism workers. When you did that, we had a conversation and you explained a sort of theory of the city's, of city politics and the city's economy that goes something like, we have not done enough to capitalize on the fact that we are a desirable destination to turn that desirability into funding for city services that don't need to be paid by city residents, that turning our tourism advantage into an advantage for residents. So that was sort of an animating idea behind the tourism industry wage increase. I would say that seemed, you invoked that idea a couple times with the Balboa Park parking increase. You invoked it again with the short-term vacation rental idea. And the other idea that you've proposed is paying for parking or an entry fee or something along those lines for Mission Bay Park and city
for
beaches.
Non-residents.
For non-residents.
Only non-residents.
Only for non-residents. Now, Balboa parking is in the middle of the most significant backlash in city politics in certainly the last 6 or 10 months, right? It's generating protests on a nearly daily basis. Short-term vacation rental got shot down before it really took liftoff. The Mission Bay Park concept was left out of 3 budget memos that it was included in the fall. Why do you think that this sort of theory of city politics doesn't seem to be working right now?
I think there's a few different reasons. I wouldn't say that. First of all, we passed the minimum wage increase,
Yeah.
and hospitality workers in the city are going to get a raise on July 1st of this
July
year
1st.
because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Second, the issues around the rollout of Balboa Park are unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
The communication ahead of time, the inability to make the free parking easily accessible and known about. There's a variety of reasons, and I understand why. Having seen that, and then seeing the understandable frustration of community members, there's a hesitancy to do anything
Mm-hmm.
at that point, because the city's residents don't have faith that we'll execute well.
Yeah.
The general idea, though, that San Diego needs to look to the people who profit the most here and the people who visit here before we look to our own residents
Mm-hmm.
for additional revenue. Look, we always need to be more efficient. We always need to make sure we're not allowing dollars to go to waste. And there is a reality that has been facing the city for generations, and that is that we need to be resourced better to ensure that we can maintain, repair, and build the things that folks want. We can have the services that folks want. And the question is, where is that going to come from? And for too long, the city did one of two things: ignored that reality, or looked to everyday people first before asking those who make the most and are here for pleasure. I'm going to keep saying, stop looking to San Diegans first and start asking visitors and the people who profit the most to pay their fair share first.
Yeah. I mean, so in terms of the city being under-resourced, in your time in office, the couple of the ways that you've gone after that, which, as you said, not many people have really gone after true revenue sources, but you led the way on what became the trash fee increase, and then you eventually cast a vote for the parking fee. I don't think that feels to people like targeted resource extraction towards the people that make the most money. I mean, I know that conceptually, people who lived in apartments mostly didn't pay for trash services, and people who lived in single family homes reverse that. People who lived in apartments mostly did pay for trash services, and people who lived in single family homes mostly didn't. And comparatively speaking, people who live in single family homes are better off than people who live in apartments. But I don't think most people who live in single family homes think
I'd agree with that.
That I'm the I'm the cash cow that the city isn't tapping.
They're
right?
not. Yeah.
And most people who spend a lot of time at Balboa Park don't think of themselves as like the type of person who hasn't been paying enough.
Agreed.
Right. So if that's the theory, like how did it get lost in execution or in translation once it was becoming a policy?
Well, I think the trash fee is about not bleeding revenue that or an expense that every other city recovers for.
Yeah.
Parking, that implementation, again, unacceptable.
Yeah.
So the way it was operationalized, despite significant input and even a request to hold off before starting because I did not think it was ready to go.
Yeah.
It moved forward and did so in a way that has had a negative impact, and I get that. What we talked about yesterday was a proposal that would have been paid for by less than 1% of San Diegans. That's a mathematical fact. And we know that Airbnb came in with their many, many millions of dollars. They literally paid to bus in folks from Los Angeles to just put on their T-shirts and give the appearance of grassroots support. I don't think it mattered in terms of influencing the vote necessarily. Andy, I think it's indicative of the grotesque way that money influences politics, that the way that they were threatening to impact politics. I know, and Airbnb knows, that the proposal we put forward yesterday was popular with voters. There's a reason why they did not want to see that get to the voters. There's a reason why they went scorched earth before that. And my lesson from that is a couple things. One, there needs to be much better disclosure on the spending that's done before a campaign begins, because I think that lobbyists and Airbnb and the Chamber of Commerce blew through a loophole that allowed them to hide behind deceptive messages, text messages, mail, phone calls that scared everyday people. And that targeting a very narrow sliver of San Diego, of folks who own either a second empty home or a short-term vacation rental, and use that year-round for those purposes, elicits the same type of pushback that you would expect from a tax on the entire business community, which tells me that San Diego's big businesses will not give an inch, that they are going to continuously ask, while lying to everyday people that they're trying to save the money. They will advocate for a sales tax. They will advocate for advocate against every single proposal that we've ever brought forward to protect consumers. So I think we just need to go after the big guys. I think that's my lesson: is
don't cast a narrow.
Yeah, we should go after. Maybe a better way to approach this would be to eliminate the tax from small businesses and increase or add a gross receipts tax on big businesses that are profiting the most here in San Diego, that are extracting billions of dollars. Other big cities across the country do that. It generates hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And I think it's much more fair to ask them to do that so we can pay for things like affordable housing and homelessness prevention, childcare, fund our public safety the way it should be funded, before asking folks to pay more for parking, pay more for sales tax. So my lesson is very clear. They are extremists. They're radicals who will oppose any effort to fund the city properly. They don't give a damn about the well-being of the city. They certainly don't give a damn about everyday working people. Lesson learned.
So that's going to be your new approach. Bigger.
It's one of the options that's on the table. I think we should be looking at that. If the idea is that a tax that would have encouraged folks to put empty homes and mini hotels back into the housing market, which important note, the Chamber of Commerce consistently says that housing is an issue that our local companies can't afford. Or local companies can't find people for their jobs because people can't afford to live here. If that's their approach to something so narrow, then there's no point in aiming small. Let's go big. Let's fund the city properly, and let's put that on the biggest corporations in San Diego.
Does the sort of overall fear of cost of living increases right now give you any pause about whether this is the time to take on the city's revenue problem? The city has a revenue problem, or at the very least, the city has a revenue problem as long as it has expectations of maintaining this service level. One of those two things has to give at some point. That's what a structural deficit is. But is an inflationary environment where people are primarily concerned with cost of living the right time to discuss attacking the revenue side of the issue?
I think it depends on how we're doing that. If we're asking everyday people to pay more, then no. I understand why folks are tired of that. I understand why there isn't an appetite for that. I also know that people know that corporations are extracting incredible amounts of wealth from our city, from our state, from our country. People do not believe big corporations pay their fair share. They're tired of getting of being screwed when they're paying for the things that they need in their lives. They're tired of corporations having all the tax breaks that they have. They're tired of corporations not giving an inch to make their lives easier. And so who we ask to pay, I think, matters a lot. And asking the biggest businesses in San Diego to pay so that we can have the city we deserve, I think that's an entirely different conversation. There's a reason why those sort of measures pass in the mid to high 60s, sometimes 70% range in other cities. And so it all depends on where it's coming from. And there are people who, while I was counting out with hundreds of San Diegans, counting the number of people sleeping on our streets this morning, there were lobbyists and big business champions in San Diego who woke up this morning with a hangover because they celebrated defeating an effort to make more housing available to everyday people. And if they think that they won, they're wrong. If they think that the people are with them, they are very, very wrong. And we have to keep this effort going. And the big lie of San Diego politics is that it doesn't take money to create the city that we want. It's how the pension crisis started. That we can have a big party, a big Republican convention here, not pay for it, rob Peter to pay Paul. It's that continuous lie. And I think it's very concerning right now that as we're in this difficult environment, we're seeing folks back away from being willing to be honest about, look, it's going to require either more revenue from somewhere, from someone, and it shouldn't be everyday people, or we're going to have to scale back services that people want. People love their libraries. People love their parks and their rec centers. They want firefighters to respond to calls. They want lifeguards on the beaches, and many people want officers on the streets. Those things don't happen by themselves. And that doesn't even get to the infrastructure backlog.
Well, so last year we had a large budget deficit, and you guys mostly addressed it not by scaling back services. There were some service cuts, but generally speaking, services were not a big part of how that budget was balanced. The revenue pieces that were part of how the budget was balanced have been, the subject of most of what we've been talking about today, right? So as you go back at it, and there is still a deficit, and you're again looking at, some version of the same problem you were looking at a year ago, are you wondering whether it's time to at least demonstrate what this sort of imbalance would require if the answer was going to come from the other side of the ledger? Are you going to look at scaling back services, based on the feedback of the last year?
Well, I think the math says that we're going to have to. We did make significant reductions in certain areas last year. We also used revenue to balance.
I mean, have you heard any big feedback on the effect of big cuts from last year?
I think what we were able to do is really kind of trim the last of the fat, and look, we have to continuously be looking to do that. And then some of what we cut back on are things that we do not see right now, but will have a cost later on. And I think that's part of the problem here is we can use the practices of the past, which says, we'll pay for the things that people see and feel on an everyday basis. We won't pay for the things that won't. That's how you end up with a multi-billion-dollar stormwater backlog. That's how you end up with sidewalks that need to be repaired and the multi-billion-dollar infrastructure backlog that we have. So we can't go down that route. And I think that this year's budget conversation is going to be a difficult one. And we're going to have to really even dig deeper with the community to understand what is most valued. And then I think an important part for us is articulating what are we actually trying to deliver for people? Because I don't think that as a city as a whole, we've done a good job of doing that. If we scale something back, is it in the effort to deliver better, only and deal with the reality that we may not be able to deliver as much? This is going to be a difficult budget conversation, and whatever revenue may be coming isn't coming overnight, and it's not going to bail us out of that. I am eyes wide open about that. What I also know, though, is that this city can be better resourced, and it needs to be better resourced, and it can be better resourced from people who have the most.
We'll end it there. Sean, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Andy.
Unless you're like me and have been living in a cave with your eyes closed and your fingers in your ears, you've heard about the new parking fees at Balboa Park. The mayor says the city needs the money. The city council has been a little bit all over the place about it, and a lot of regular people are very unhappy. There is still plenty of uncertainty over these new fees, including how they'll be enforced and how they might still change. And on our panel today, we've got two guests who will help us get to the bottom of it. Joining us are Katherine Johnston, the former chair of the Balboa Park Committee and a practicing municipal attorney, and Howard Blackson, a current member of the Balboa Park Committee and an urban designer. So, folks, let's start here. Parking used to be free at Balboa Park, and now it's not, or at least that's the intention. How do you tell a family struggling to make ends meet that they need to bear this extra cost just to visit the park? And Katherine, we'll start with you.
I'll first say that this wasn't my proposal, and so I'll speak to it as best I can. But I did want to first clarify that there is still free parking in the park in Inspiration Point for up to 3 hours. And there are trams available for folks who can park in Inspiration Point and use the shuttle service to get to the main Central Mesa Park. What I would say is I understand that there are a lot of San Diegans who go to the park on a regular basis. The park is large. The current shuttle route does not go to the west side of the park. So if you are someone living in Bankers Hill who use the west side of the park, Inspiration Point might not always be the best option for you. There are resident discounts, which I'm sure we'll talk about at length later. But I recognize that people are struggling right now, and it's is a change, so people are getting used to the new status quo within the park.
Howard, what are your thoughts about this basic question about adding a fee to parking at most of Balboa Park?
Yeah, it is a tiered system. As mentioned, Inspiration Point is free, and the rates go up as you get closer to the heart of the park. And I think that we have to understand that we're in a new era of finance and funding in city of San Diego and the nation throughout, and that we need to have more than just driving and to the park to access the park, and that if a family's struggling and having a hard time, go say something to your city council person, because right now they're thinking about it, and say something such as, "Where's the bus? Where's the trams? Where's the transit?" There is internal trams, but as I said, they're not quite there yet. So there are a variety of things you can say to a variety of people right now, because we're talking about it, and it had to happen this way.
I would say a lot of folks are complaining to their city council member about it right now. It seems to be the hottest topic in town. One thing I saw recently that was kind of interesting, the folks representing the many museums and performance venues at the park are saying there's been a noticeable decline in attendance since this idea kind of started, and once the enforcement kind of half started. It hasn't been a great rollout. I think we can all agree. Those folks with the museums are saying that they are losing their own revenue as a result. So how do we address their concerns? Howard, let's start with you this time.
As you said, it's all over the place. City council all over the place. So is funding and financing and building and maintaining and operating Balboa Park. There is no real plan. Our plan is from 1989. It's time to update the plan. It's time to figure out what our priorities are, because the city really only leases the buildings for cheap, but the institutions have to maintain them and operate them, and that takes most of the money than able to spend on programs. So right now we need to coordinate this variety of funding sources that are out there and have a plan for what we're going to do, and it's time to do that.
So for those folks with the museums specifically, is the argument, you're going to get a share of these parking fees, or like what's the how do you address their concerns that there's been a climb down of revenue because fewer people have been willing to come to the park because of the parking fees?
Unfortunately, the fees are going to go into the general fund. And that's a new age parking district. It's not the way parking districts have been done in the past, where the fees stayed within the parking district area, such as in North Park and downtown. So no, there is no new money coming. It is going to be a real, it's going to get worse before it gets better, but this is a good first step, because parks of similar size, Golden Gate Park, Central Park, Forest Park in St. Louis, Grant Park in Chicago, all have revenue charge for parking, but they have parking garages. They have a parking management plan. They have an organization that manages all that. We're managing it with city staff at Parks and Rec Department, which just doesn't have enough oomph to be able to support Mission Bay Park, Balboa Park, all of our city parks all at once.
Seems like we have an issue of both revenue and availability in terms of staff, but it kind of feels like a chicken and egg problem with some of these constant issues we see at the city of San Diego, and this is another one. Katherine, I want to get your thoughts on one thing. Are there any potential upsides to where we've been in terms of the rollout? Obviously, the rollout's been bad. Let's stipulate that right off the bat. Like, no one's been happy with how this has come forward. Even the most ardent supporters would say this has gone poorly. But if the implementation could be professionalized and upscaled a bit, what are the potential benefits of a program like this coming into effect? Like long term, how could this potentially benefit the city of San Diego?
So I've been volunteering and working in the park for almost a decade now, and to what Howard said, there isn't a current dedicated revenue source for the park. Per state law, Proposition 26, revenue generated by a user fee, like a parking fee, has to remain not necessarily a geographical vicinity, but has to be reinvested in for why the fee was collected, has to be reasonably related. So the revenue created must go back into the park. Howard is correct that probably in this fiscal year, that means that general fund that was once dedicated to park will be reallocated to help balance the budget. However, moving forward, this is a revenue source that could be bonded against, that could be leveraged to make investments into the museums, the institutions. I also think that I don't want to diminish how hard it is to run an institution and a museum, but I think likely we're seeing a decline in in a museum attendance because it's new. People are going to have to get used to it. And I also think that a lot of the coverage has neglected to remind folks that there is a free option. And I think there's options to include free options all day at the perimeter of the park and then charge a premium rate for up close. If for folks familiar with Balboa Park, you have lots that are really close, like Alcazar lot. That could be a premium VIP lot, something like that. And then you can have free parking on the perimeter of the park. And the benefit of that is then you can improve circulation in the central park, create a more friendly visitor experience. It would be better for pedestrians. If you go to Balboa Park, you know that on a Saturday morning, there's a line of cars going through the Plaza de Panama. Imagine a system where behavior changes, where you don't have that congestion right at the middle of the park and you have a really improved visitor experience.
So it sounds like you're saying potentially there's going to be a return to an equilibrium over time once people get used to it, and that maybe even the new system might make things more efficient. You said a couple of other things at the top of your answer that I want to touch on. Bonds and leverage. Now, for the folks who are watching who may not understand like the mechanism through which a bond might be issued because of new parking fees at Balboa Park, can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so parking revenue would create a special revenue source that would allow the city to bond against it, which means they could borrow money to make positive improvements to the park. Municipalities receive a very low interest rate because of their municipal status. And so it would be a mechanism to make capital improvements within the park. Parking revenue could also be used to increase staff. So this year, the IBA is now, independent budget analyst is now projecting that the city will generate about $4 million in parking revenue in Balboa Park. $4 million equates to about a little under 40% of the total general fund budget that goes to Balboa Park. And so it's not insignificant as it relates to Balboa Park. And so you could either borrow money to make large capital improvement projects, or you could allocate some of that revenue to increase shuttle service, to improve the landscaping, to hire more staff. And so I just think that's in the long term, there could be some benefit to maintaining paid parking at Balboa.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is once there is a dedicated revenue stream that is created by the paid parking in Balboa Park, the city can then borrow against that in the future, get that money up front, use it on potential other improvements to the park, and improve everyone's experience. Am I understanding you right?
Yeah, so they like to do so, yeah.
Right. Okay. So, Howard, let's say that happens and the city starts issuing bonds against this revenue. What should they do with this money that's going to come in vis-a-vis the park itself?
Well, build a parking garage, obviously, and then I'll just be able to build out the 1989 plan, which has a number of bridges, that has a number of new construction or reconstruction of buildings around the plazas. And then also you could do something new along the 6th and the park on the southwest corner that is the gateway to downtown that currently is just open, grass and trees. So there's a number of projects going on. Look at all the upgrades that are happening around the Plaza de Panama right now. Museum of Art is proposing Sir Norman Foster. Menge has it rebuilt itself. The Timken is rebuilding. So the Plaza was an obvious way of generating capital of money that can be used, and the paid parking and portions and parts that's managed well is another way. But the 800-pound gorilla in all this is the zoo, because the zoo has a property taxes dedicated to it. It is now also going to charge for parking, but it's fine. The zoo does great. Right next door where the cultural district is, it needs that. It needs that revenue source, and I don't see the parking being the revenue source. It's just going to be one of many, and we need to coordinate those.
Okay. Let me ask a provocative question to you both. I hear all the time, especially among folks who kind of are City Hall watchers or they're involved, there's a huge backlog of improvements that need to be made at Balboa Park, and this parking fee rollout is just another example of the problems inherent with administering Balboa Park. Is Balboa Park still the crown jewel of San Diego? Katherine, what do you think?
The beauty of Balboa Park is that so many people in our community use it for different activities and cultural organizations. When I first became acquainted with Balboa Park, I was always impressed. Every time I came to the park, there was something new and exciting about it that I learned, a local organization that was doing something, a volunteer organization. And so I do think it's a cultural hub to our community. I also think that in this era of political polarization, social isolation, it plays a critical role in our society and our city. And so I do think that while it probably needs to be shined up a bit, it still is really the cultural heartbeat of our city. And that's, I think, why it's eliciting such a strong reaction. Because if you look at the rates, they're objectively not that high compared to other major urban parks and or even if you go downtown. And so I think it's just because it's become such a big part of daily life for San Diegos. And so that's why you're seeing that really passionate response. So I would say it's definitely still the jewel. We need to work collaboratively to shine it up a bit, but I think it still has that special place in San Diego's heart.
Howard?
Yeah, thank you. I think very few people actually see the things that we see working with the Balboa Park Committee and see it as a great place. Look at today. Today's absolutely beautiful. It's January. And people, the demand to go for the park is obviously there by the backlash and how filled the parking spaces were before the fees were generated. And that's part of the problem is people see it as a jewel. So why invest more into it? We've already got a great place. And that's part of the problem to overcome is the perception that, hey, there are structural deficits that need to be fixed. But gosh, is it important to us economically, socially, as you pointed out in this era of isolation and people feeling anxiety and culture, it's a good place to get together and talk about it.
Some great insights from our panelists, and I think they have a good point. Even a democratized space like Balboa Park needs some improvement sometimes. You have to shine the jewel, as they put it. I think that's right. Thanks. I'm back with Andy, and we are going to try something here today that we hope will be a monthly endeavor for us. That is local political power rankings. We're going to count down for our top 3 this month. Andy, why don't you kick us off with number 3?
Number 3 is easy. That is Matt Strabone, somehow La Mesa City Treasurer, got his own TV show this week.
My grandmother must have been on the voting panel this month. Number 2, former mayor of San Diego and current head of the Lincoln Club, Kevin Faulconer, who pulled off quite the trick. He presented himself as the face of the anti-Balboa Park parking fee movement. Just a few years ago, he proposed parking fees at Balboa Park.
Quite a trick indeed. All right, and number 1, we've got somebody who's trying to do something that doesn't happen often. That's turn a political career in San Diego into a statewide launching pad. We've got Richard Barrera. He's running to be the state superintendent of education and got the California Teachers Commission's endorsement in that effort. But that's not the only thing he did this week. He also was part of the San Diego School Board that approved some 3,000 teacher workforce housing units. That alone is more than the state has ever produced, the entire state. This is just the San Diego Unified District would do that on a number of sites, including 1,500 units on their University Heights district headquarters site.
Now, he had a good month. And if you are unhappy with any of these rankings, make sure you send an email to andrewk@timesofsandiego.com. I'm sure Andy will be happy to hear from you. Before we continue, we would both like to give a quick shout out to our old friend, Gene Cubison, the local legend and longtime reporter at NBC San Diego, who was the inspiration for this show. Gene, hope you're doing great. And I think that'll do it for this very first episode of the San Diego Politics Show. We're so glad you invited us onto your screens for this, and we hope you come back real soon. Until next time, look after one another and be kind.